After being child-free for 3 years, my husband suddenly brought home a 3-year-old child, expressing his desire to be a father. My mother-in-law advised me that a married couple can't be without children forever, and since we don't want to have any, we might as well adopt my sister-in-law's child. She spoke earnestly. You are the only one left in your family now. Without a child, you'll just end up being bullied in the future. This child is from our own family, so there's no need to worry about him turning against us in the future. But I know that this child is actually my husband's love child from his affair with the mistress. They tried to poison my food, wanting me to die early so they could take over my family's property. But their plans were in vain. I am not some naive and innocent heiress. When I go crazy, I can even scare the dog next door into wetting itself. My husband brought back a child, a boy of about 3 or 4 years old, who timidly hid behind his legs. Sang, this is my sister's youngest son. You've met him, He stopped mid-sentence, perhaps feeling too ashamed, or maybe thinking it didn't quite align with his persona. My mother-in-law quickly chimed in. Sang, you see, your health hasn't been great. Mom feels for you. All these years of marriage, I've never rushed you about having kids. I brushed my hair back and glanced at Huang Jiaming, who was standing nearby. His gaze darted away, unwilling to meet my eyes. My mother-in-law continued. But you know the situation with your parents. You're the only one left in your family. If you don't have children, won't you be bullied to death in the future? With a child, your future will be secured, and your parents can be at ease. She grew more excited as she spoke, entirely oblivious to Huang Jiaming's changing expression. Why are you pulling me? I'm just telling the truth. This child is still one of our own. There's no need to worry about any betrayal in the future. Sang, don't take it to heart. My mom didn't mean that. I almost crushed the teacup in my hand. Then what does she mean? Huang Jiaming was at a loss. My mother-in-law still had a rosy complexion. I don't mean anything by it, just think that since you're married, you should have a child. With a child around, life has something to look forward to. When they grow up, they can also look after you, so you won't be lonely in the future. I interrupted her incessant talking. Mom, we agreed not to have children before we got married, didn't Jiaming tell you? Besides, this is Sister Jessen's child. My mother-in-law looked disapproving. You were young back then, you didn't know any better. How can a couple live without a child? Besides, I'm not insisting that you have one. I care about you too. If you don't want to, you don't have to. See, I brought you a ready-made boy. I took a deep breath and shifted my gaze to Huang Jiaming. Jiaming, what do you think? He hesitated. Well, why don't we just adopt him then? I also want to be a dad. I looked at him steadily, without speaking. Before we got married, I explicitly told him that we might not have children after marriage, and that I didn't plan to get pregnant and give birth. At that time, he nodded in agreement, and now bringing a child home saying he wants to be a father. What is that supposed to mean? My mother-in-law panicked and pinched the child's lower back, making the child immediately cry out. Feeling annoyed, I frowned and shouted directly, "Stop making noise." The child was startled by me and cried even louder, this time genuinely and with deep emotion. Both my mother-in-law and husband's faces froze in surprise. I have always been mild-tempered and have never raised my voice at home. Now, my mother-in-law's expression turned unhappy. Qin sang, I'm saying this for your own good. It's understandable not to have children right after getting married, but it's been years. You can't keep refusing to have kids. You know the situation with your parents. We don't know when they'll wake up. The household relies entirely on Jiaming, the only man. Having you adopt a child is also for your benefit. Look at your parents. If it weren't for having you as their only child, they wouldn't have been able to stay in the hospital this long. This family would have fallen apart long ago. Huang Jiaming awkwardly leaned over and whispered to me. My mom doesn't talk nicely sometimes. Don't take it to heart. She means well, it's all for our own good. I tossed the teacup onto the coffee table. For our own good? For our own good means my parents aren't even gone yet, and you're all so worried no one will inherit the family wealth that you bring a child in to claim it? Do you have no shame? Huang Jiaming was stunned. Why are you talking so harshly? Harsh? If it's harsh to hear, then why are you doing such an ugly thing? My mother-in-law immediately lost it. She shot to her feet and pointed at my nose, yelling, And hey, what kind of attitude is that? How can you twist our good intentions like that? We're raising this child so that when he grows up, he'll take care of your family. How many more years can an old woman like me enjoy? What do you mean your family, or my family? Since you're married, it's all shared property between you as a couple. If you don't leave an heir behind, that's when it'll really get stolen someday. Besides, other people have already become fathers at this age. Jiaming is heartbroken that you can't have children, yet he's been holding back without saying anything. You have parents, and you're a daughter too. Do you really want to deprive him of the right to be a father? As she spoke, she bowed her head and began to wipe her tears, making it seem as if I had bullied Huang Jiaming and her AL. I closed my eyes, remaining extremely calm. It doesn't matter. If our paths differ, we needn't walk them together. If you want to have children, we can divorce and you can adopt a few or have your own. That won't do. Both mother-in-law and Huang Jiaming were anxious, responding in unison, immediately rejecting the idea. Huang Jiaming soothed his mother and then approached me, taking a step back to advance further. Since you're not willing, let's drop it. How can we talk about divorce? My mom spoke impulsively. Don't blame her. I apologize to you. It's just that now the child is already here, and it's not good to send him back immediately. Why don't we let him stay at home for a few days, and then I'll send him back to my sister later, okay? He held my hand, his eyes full of pleading. I felt a stir in my heart. Are you sure you want to adopt this child? Huang Jiaming's eyes lit up. Great, then you can be the dad. Seeing me agree, Huang Jiaming was pleasantly surprised. Mother-in-law suddenly perked up and pushed the child in front of me, asking him to call me mom. The child glanced at me, crying, pouted, and burrowed into my mother-in-law's arms, refusing to speak. I ignored it, turned around, and went upstairs. Back in a room, I turned on my phone to check the living room surveillance. The surveillance was installed at a great expense, with clear visuals and excellent audio. Downstairs, the child was sobbing on the sofa, and my mother-in-law was gesturing excitedly while holding my husband's hand. I didn't expect it to be so simple. You had the idea to get a hold of her. Huang Jiaming's tone was accusatory. Mom, watch what you say next time. Qin Sang isn't a fool. If you're that blunt, she'll definitely get angry, and if she finds out something, it won't be good. My mother-in-law pouted. A sickly person. So, what if she finds out? Her parents are lying in the hospital. Who knows when they'll die? If she gets angry and dies, won't everything she has belong to you and your son? So, even though my parents aren't dead yet, they're already planning to cut off my lineage. No wonder I could taste something strange in the food lately. I've been in poor health since I was young, practically living on medicine. As a result, I have an almost uncanny intuition for the taste of medicine. When did I start tasting bitterness in the porridge? I closed my eyes and thought carefully. It probably started after I got married, about 2 years later, when Huang Jiaming started cooking for me again. Huang Jiaming was initially a poor student my family supported. Although he came from a rural background, his grades were outstanding. When we first assisted him, he even begged us to support his sister's education as well. Most families in the village favored sons over daughters, and they wouldn't give girls the chance to go to school. Oh well, but he was the one who asked. My father praised him for not forgetting his sister even in such circumstances. So, he decided to support both the siblings together. I had poor health since childhood, and my parents' initial intention in doing so much charity was to pray for blessings for me. Therefore, having one more or less did not really matter to my father. After graduating from high school, he found his way to our home specifically to express his gratitude. He mentioned that he was now an adult and would strive to repay the Qin family through his own efforts. My father engaged in numerous charitable acts, and each year, many outstanding graduates chose to stay and work in the Qin family's company. Therefore, he regarded Huang Jiaming as just another student among them. Unexpectedly, a few years later, they encountered a car accident on their way back from a charitable event and fell into a coma. The vast family business suddenly fell upon me, still in college, overnight. It was during this time that Huang Jiaming came to my side. He stayed with me day and night to face the company's crises. He shielded me from many ill-intentioned glances at the dinner table. I understood his intentions. That day, it was already late when I returned from visiting my parents at the hospital. During that period, I was under a lot of stress, and the busier I became, the more I missed my parents. After arriving home, I looked at the dark villa, and a sense of confusion suddenly rose in my heart. My parents were not accustomed to having the housekeeper live in with them. They preferred to manage the house themselves. When the accident first happened, I hadn't had time to make arrangements at home. At that moment, a beam of light shone at my feet, and Huang Jiaming wobbled as he stood up. He grimaced as he rubbed his numb, squatting legs. You're back. I didn't hide my thoughts about possibly not wanting children after marriage. Firstly, my health is not good, and pregnancy poses a greater risk for me, and it could also interfere with my work at the Qin Corporation. Secondly, my parents have not yet regained consciousness, and I don't want any accidents on my part to cause me to miss the chance of them waking up. The look in Huang Jiaming's eyes was incredibly firm. Sang, I want to stand by your side rightfully, to protect you and accompany you. I don't care about kids. I only care if you'll be there in the future. As long as I can be by your side, nothing else matters. I feel for you. I love you. I want to be your support. 5 years have passed, and the words still ring in my ears. My parents are still lying in the hospital, with their heart monitors showing a steady rhythm day after day. They couldn't wait, seeing me as a defenseless pastry that could be devoured at will. My mother-in-law stayed on the pretext of helping Zila get familiar with the new environment. When I got home, my mother-in-law pulled me to sit at the table. Huang Jiaming was there too. Sang, today the three of us are having a meal to welcome Zila into this family. The table was filled with exquisite and expensive dishes, and Aunt Wang was still busy in the kitchen. It was too greasy, and I had little appetite. After eating a few bites, I set down my chopsticks. Mother-in-law quickly went to the kitchen to bring a bowl of soup. Sang, dear, this is specially brewed by Mom to nourish your body. It has been simmered all day. Drink it while it's hot. A light layer of oil floated on the milky white broth as I took the bowl and placed it on the table. Mom, I'm full and can't drink anymore. Give it to Zile. He's young and growing. How can that be? My mother-in-law urgently retorted. I noticed the brief flash of panic on Huang Jiaming's face and quietly stirred the soup. This is pigeon soup. Kids can drink it. But this is a medicinal soup that Mom brewed just for you, with tonic herbs added. It's meant for you. It'll be wasted if you don't drink it. Soup with added ingredients, indeed, was meant for me to drink. I lowered my head, the smile on my lips unchanged. Mom, I really can't drink it now, just leave it here. I'll have it later. The mother-in-law wouldn't let it go. Pouting her lips, she wore her displeasure openly on her face. How can you be so ungrateful? I got up early in the morning to make soup for you, and yet you don't appreciate it. Huang Jiaming also tried to persuade me. Sang, my mom really worked hard on this all day. Can you just have a little taste? Mom, I really can't drink it right now. Just leave it there for now. I'll have it later. The mother-in-law still wouldn't budge. Pouting her lips, she wore her displeasure openly on her face. How can you be so ungrateful? I got up early in the morning to make soup for you, and yet you don't appreciate it. Huang Jiaming also tried to persuade me. Sang, my mom really worked hard on this all day. Can you just have a little taste? I was upset as well. Loosening my grip, the spoon struck the edge of the bowl with a crisp clink. I said I don't want to drink it right now. If you're so worried about wasting it, then you drink it. I placed the bowl of soup in front of Huang Jiaming and immediately turned my head, shouting loudly for Aunt Wang to bring out the rest of the soup still in the pot. Come on, you've already drunk it. Where one is a couple, it's your mother's kind intention. Don't waste it. Huang Jiaming was stunned, and his mother-in-law was also taken aback. She hurried over to take the bowl back, complaining. Oh, this is a good tonic for nourishing yin. How could it be given to a man to drink? Then, Mom, you should drink it yourself. It's a good tonic for nourishing yin and kidney. Keeping it is indeed a waste. Huang Jiaming got anxious and slammed the table. Sang, why have you suddenly changed like this? My mom means well. How can you be so impolite to her? Even if you're upset about the child, don't disregard her kind intentions like this. I glanced at him and laughed derisively without any courtesy. I'm in my own home, and it's one thing not to have what I love to eat. Do I have to be dictated on what to eat, how much to eat, or whether or not to eat? Huang Jiaming got so angry that he stood up. If you don't want to eat, just say so. Is it that hard to speak nicely? Is my mom in debt to you? She's been busy all day for you and gets nothing in return, and yet you treat her like this. Looking at his indignant expression, I was truly astounded. I said from the start that I didn't want to drink, but who cared about what I wanted? They only cared if I drank or not. Seeing my uncompromising attitude, my mother-in-law hurried to mediate. All right, you can drink it later. I chuckled coldly, dialed a few numbers, and soon the door was pushed open by 4 tall and burly men. Let me introduce them. These are the bodyguards I hired a couple of days ago. These 2 are my husband and mother-in-law. You 4 help feed them the soup on the table and make sure they finish all the food here. Don't let anything go to waste. Having said that, I ignored the commotion downstairs, turned around, went upstairs, shut the door, and slept soundly. The next day, I reviewed the surveillance footage of the living room from last night. At first, the mother-in-law and Huang Jiaming were clamoring to call the police, but their phones were snatched by the bodyguards, and Aunt Wang acted as if she hadn't seen anything. A slap for each of them, and they both became obedient. The child was lifted up and placed on the table. For pairs of glaring eyes were enough to scare the child into crouching down like a quail, holding their head and no longer daring to cry. The meal on the table was truly lavish. After finishing the pot of nourishing pigeon soup, the remaining two of us were already too full to eat anymore. As for Jiaming, when he refused to eat, someone held him down and stuffed food into his mouth. If he spat it out, he'd get slapped again, so he had no choice but to swallow it obediently. The mother-in-law felt sorry for her son. Even though she wasn't the one getting slapped, she buried herself in the task of helping her son share the burden of eating. After suffering that lesson last time, they finally realized that I was truly angry. When I'm in a bad mood, the things I do are indeed not pleasant. As a result, they timidly avoided me for a few days and behaved themselves for a while. In the evening, Huang Jiaming brought me a cup of warm milk and insisted that I must drink it. Do I really have to drink it? I asked him. He flinched slightly, then fixed his gentle gaze on me.
I
know you haven't been feeling well lately. You've had no appetite and didn't eat much for dinner. Drink a little to nourish your stomach. I quietly stared at him, trying to find a trace of guilt or hesitation in his eyes. But there was none. Calmly and with a clear conscience, he handed me the poison, softly coaxing me to drink it. Just leave it here. I'll drink it in a bit. This time, Huang Jiaming was noticeably more obedient. He set down the milk without daring to say another unnecessary word. While he was in the shower, I poured the milk into a sample bag I had prepared beforehand. When he came out of the bathroom, what he found was the cup with a small amount of milk left at the bottom. He let out a sigh of relief and took the cup away. That's just my usual habit when drinking, leaving a small portion at the bottom that I don't want to finish. I lay on my side listening to the sounds of him leaving, contemplating in my heart that it was time for a divorce. On the third day, the test results were sent to my phone. As expected, there were indeed drugs added that could cause nervous breakdowns. At the same time, the private detective sent me a message. In the photo, Huang Jiaming was holding a woman who was crying her heart out. I recognized her, Meng Xiaoqing, Huang Jiaming's first love from high school. Huang Zile was already of the age to attend kindergarten, and Huang Jiaming wanted the child to go to a better private kindergarten. But over the years, I have been managing the company's affairs myself, so when it comes to connections, he still needs to rely on me to step in. After a few days of showing a good face, he really forgot about the previous incident. Sang, Zile is of age to attend kindergarten. Since we decided to raise him, we should plan well for him, shouldn't we? He came over and pulled me into his arms. I leaned back and raised my hand to block his body. Back when you decided to adopt the child, you didn't even discuss it with me. You know I don't like kids. He froze, not expecting me to say such a thing now. But didn't you agree that day? Yes, I agreed to let you be a father. He looked stunned. What do you mean by that? I mean I agreed to let you adopt the child yourself. He was completely taken aback and then visibly incredulous. Qin sang, how can you say something like that? When we adopted Zilo, you clearly agreed. How can you go back on your word now? Do you think this is some kind of game? If you weren't willing, why didn't you say so earlier? Now the child is already living here, and you're telling me you're against it? Since when did you become so unreasonable? I got up and moved to the other side, with a smirk that wasn't quite a smile. It was that same sentence again. Didn't I make it clear from the start? I thought when you agreed to go child-free with me, you were being serious too. A flash of guilt crossed his face, and his tone softened. Sang, don't be angry. Look, your parents have been in the hospital all this time, and if they never wake up, would you really be willing to let their beloved daughter spend the rest of her life without any support? This is truly the same unreasonable logic as his mother, not to mention that my support does not need to come from someone more than 20 years younger than me. As my husband, at this moment, isn't he the one who should be my support? Can't you be my support? I'm really curious. After being together for 2 years and married for 3, hasn't he ever had any genuine feelings for me? He came over and held me in his arms again. Sang, I also wish that you had more people to rely on. I still arranged for that child to attend a high-end private kindergarten, because Huang Jiaming's sister, Huang Jessen, came to see me. Sang, I know you're worried that the child won't be yours in the future. Don't worry, Zile will have only one mother, and that's you. As long as you're willing, I can cooperate with you both to complete all the adoption procedures. It's my fault as his mother. I'm useless, unable to protect him. I don't ask for much. I just want them all to live well. I agreed to her request, but didn't mention anything about the adoption procedures. At the same time, I deliberately didn't prepare anything for the child. As expected, a few days later, I received a call from the director. Huang Zile had a conflict with another child at the kindergarten. They got into a fight, and he fell and hit the stairs, ending up in the hospital. Those who hurried over after the call included not only the grandmother and the Huang siblings, but also Meng Xiaoqing. Huang Jiesin anxiously checked the bandage wrapped around the child's head, her tears flowing uncontrollably out of heartache. Huang Zile, pale-faced, threw himself into her arms and wailed. What happened? Why were you fighting? Are the injuries serious? Which little brat was so badly brought up that they dared to hit someone at such a young age? The grandmother yelled about finding the other child's parents, but she couldn't locate them. To avoid any trouble, I had already sent the other parents away in advance. Meng Xiaoqing stood on the outermost edge of the crowd, quietly watching with her lips pressed together. What's going on here? Why did they start fighting? Huang Jiaming turned his head to ask me. It's nothing serious. Zile took someone else's toy, and that's how the fight started. Nonsense. Our Zile would never take someone else's toy. Without thinking, my mother-in-law immediately voiced her disapproval. It's my fault after all. I've never raised a child before, and I neglected him for a moment, didn't prepare well for him, which led Zile to take another kid's toy. You really need to pay more attention as a mother. If you're so focused on work all the time, you should hand things over to Jiaming if you can't handle it. If you don't take care of the child as his mother, who will? My mother-in-law continued to lecture, but I turned and walked towards Meng Xiaoqing. Honey, who might this be? Huang Jiaming snapped back to reality and hurried over as well. This is my assistant. She came along when I got the call. I nodded and extended my hand to her with a smile. She hesitated for a moment, but then took my hand. I waited for the crowd to disperse before approaching Huang Jiesin, handing her the examination report with a caring tone. Don't worry, Xiaolu just has a bump on the head. It's a superficial injury. All the checks have been done. Take a look. Her eyes were red, looking at me with a gaze that was aggrieved, but also well hidden with blame. I pretended not to notice, holding the examination report in front of her eyes. She glanced at it, about to continue comforting the child, but something caught her eye like a hook, fixing her gaze firmly. Standing in front of her, I could clearly see the confusion, shock, and puzzlement on her face. I then placed the report on the bed, patted the child's head, and quietly left. When I saw Huang Jiesin again, she looked haggard, her eyes filled with bloodshot veins. Sang, can you do me a favor? I feigned ignorance. What's wrong, sis? Just say it. If I can help, I definitely will. She opened her mouth but didn't know how to start. How should I put it? She said that Huang Zile is not her child, and that her child is missing. I held her hand. Don't be afraid. No matter what happens, I'm here for you. Her gaze gradually focused. She looked at me for a long while, then hesitantly said, Sang, could you help me get a strand of Jiaming's hair? I was a bit surprised. I want to verify something. I originally thought that she came to me this time to confess that Huang Zile is not her child and to ask me to help her find her own child. After all, from the information sent back by the private detective, it was clear that she had been frequently visiting the hospital where she gave birth, hoping to obtain a clue from the doctors there. I didn't expect her to be so smart and immediately suspect Huang Jiaming. Huang Jiesin barged into my house during dinner time. As soon as she entered, she was faced with the scene of my mother-in-law and husband looking lovingly at the child at the dining table. Her eyes reddened, and she rushed in to ask, Where is my child? Huang Jiaming stopped mid-bite, looking in shock at his sister, who was brimming with anger. The mother-in-law jumped up from her seat. Huang Jiesin, what are you doing? Your child is at your home. Now Zile is Sang's child. She thought Huang Jiesin had changed her mind and wanted to reclaim her hild. In a hurry, she ran over to pull her away. Don't be foolish. If you truly care for this child, leave the child with Jiaming. Huang Jiesin was pulled aside, and her gaze towards her was filled with an unfamiliar look. Mom, I said it before. Even if I get divorced, I will do my best to raise my 2 children. You are the one who insisted on finding me a new husband, forcing me to remarry with a dowry of 20,000 yuan. I endured marrying an idiot, but why won't you even spare my children? Upon hearing this, her mother-in-law got anxious and immediately slapped her. You heartless little wretch. If it weren't for the fact that you got divorced and still carry someone else's child, would I have ended up with just 20,000 as a bride price? If you had even a shred of decency, you wouldn't say something like that. You're already remarried and still want to have your ex-husband's child. Getting criticized behind your back is exactly what you deserve. I was kind enough to bring this child over for Jiaming, and instead of appreciating me for helping you solve your problem, you talk to your mother like that. You're really an ungrateful wretch. She spat viciously, her face fierce as she shoved Huang Jiesin out the door. Get out. Get out of my house. Don't come here making a scene. I hurried to stop her. Let's all calm down and talk properly. Sister Jessen came all this way. She should at least have a meal before leaving. Huang Zile had already been frightened into tears by the commotion. When I turned and glared at him, his crying caught in his throat, and he buried his head, shrinking behind Huang Jiaming. Huang Jiaming picked up the child while nodding in agreement, though slightly disapproving. That's right, sis. Let's talk calmly. You've even scared the child. Huang Jessen shook off her mother-in-law's hand and sneered mockingly at Huang Jiaming. Talk nicely. It's not your child that's missing. Of course you're in the mood to talk nicely. What are you saying, sis? Huang Jiaming's face stiffened, and his mother-in-law fell silent for a moment. Her gaze toward Huang Jessen carried a hint of shock and doubt. Huang Jessen let out a cold laugh, pulled a few sheets of paper from her bag, and flung them harshly at Huang Jiaming's face. Holding the child in his arms, Huang Jiaming, afraid of harming the baby, didn't bother dodging. The sharp edges of the paper cut across his cheek, sparking a wave of irritation in him. Before he could voice his anger, his peripheral vision was drawn to the papers fluttering to the ground. I picked up the papers from the floor. They were printed paternity test results. Flipping to the final page, I couldn't help but widen my eyes. My body swayed, and I was about to collapse. Aunt Wang let out a cry of alarm and hurried over to help me onto the sofa. My face was pale as I clutched those pieces of paper, trembling slightly. My mother-in-law nervously pulled out the papers, glanced at them without understanding, and then moved closer to Huang Jiaming. Huang Jiaming's face had already turned pale, and at that moment, he couldn't have been more clear about the situation. He didn't even need to look at the results to know what they said. Huang Zile was his biological son, after all. Huang Jessen saw her mother and brother's expressions with her own eyes, and she could easily guess the complex truth behind it all. Her tears fell swiftly and fiercely. Where's my child? My own child. In the end, no one ate that meal. Clutching my chest, I blurted out the word divorce with a pale face and was then taken to the hospital by the driver. In the ward, I carefully inquired about my parents' condition once again. The answers I got were the same as before, neither good nor bad. Uncertain of when they would wake up, I returned to my own hospital room. When only I am left, I stare at the myriad of lights outside the window, unable to help but feel a twinge of sadness. There once was a light that was lit just for me. But now they don't wake up, and there is no light that belongs to me. Sang sang. I turned around to see someone I haven't seen in a long time standing at the door.
Wen Shenglin?
What are you doing here? I was a bit surprised. He was my high school classmate and later went abroad to study. Afterward, a sudden change occurred in my family, and I lost contact with my previous friends. I heard you were ill, so I came to see you. Seeing my confusion, he continued to explain, my family owns this hospital. I took a deep breath. I see. What a coincidence. He lowered his head and smiled, then asked how I was feeling. I'm fine. Thank you for your concern. I heard you're getting divorced? I was very surprised, since the news of my divorce was left with the group at the villa before I came to the hospital. How did he hear about it so quickly? He waved his hand, somewhat apologetically. Don't get me wrong, I just mean, if you need any help, you can come to me. My number hasn't changed. I smiled warmly at him. Okay, then I'll have to trouble you to keep an eye on my parents. Mentioning this, his expression relaxed a bit. I've been keeping an eye on Uncle and Auntie, so you don't need to worry. I gradually formed a plan in my mind. At this moment, Aunt Wang knocked on the door and told me that Huang Jiaming had arrived. I frowned, glancing at Wen Chunglin, who blinked and gently took his leave. As he went out, he brushed past a frantic Huang Jiaming. Huang Jiaming clumsily bumped into someone as he rushed in. He hastily muttered apologies and rushed in to grab my hand imploringly. Sang sang, listen to my explanation. I didn't mean to deceive you. The hospital room door closed gently. I shook off his hand, and when I looked up, tears were already welling in my eyes. The paternity test is so obvious. What is left for you to explain? Do you really think I'm that stupid and easy to deceive in your eyes? You promised me we wouldn't have kids, yet you turned around and had a child with someone else. I thought you married me with the intention of being my support, my safe haven, accepting all of me. I never expected that you would deceive me from the beginning to the end. It's bad enough that you secretly had a child with someone else, but you also want me to raise your child with them. Huang Jiaming, isn't this too much? Do you think I'm Qin Sang, someone who knows nothing, a fool you can easily deceive and manipulate? I can't accept my husband treating me like a clown. Let's get a divorce. Huang Jiaming's eyes were filled with pain, and he kept muttering, it's not true, it's not true. If I hadn't already known he had been drugging my food for a year, I would have been completely fooled by his acting skills. The child was just an accident. I was drunk that time. I don't even know why I ended up so muddle-headed. Sanson, I was wrong. It's all my fault. I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to deceive you. Don't you know how much I love you? I've only lied to you about this one thing. Sanson, I beg you, forgive me this once. I can't leave you. How can I leave you without any peace of mind? I tugged at the corners of my mouth, and this time, I truly laughed until I cried. How could he have the nerve to say he only hid this one thing from me? How could he so thoughtlessly speak these words? Not leave me? What? Are you expecting me to accept the illegitimate child you had with that mistress? His lips trembled, and for a long time, his tone was bitter. Sanson, the child is innocent. I slapped him hard, making my entire hand go numb. How dare you say such things to me? The child is innocent. But what about me? Am I not innocent? Should I have to endure my husband's betrayal and swallow the fruit of your mistakes? There's no such logic in the world. Don't bully me too much. Huang Jiaming frantically explained. No, it's not like that. If you don't like it, we won't adopt. Let's just live our lives well. Sang, please don't divorce me. He bent down to grab my hand, tears glistening in his eyes. You are the only one I have ever loved. That was a mistake I made when I was out of my mind. I'm willing to give up that mistake for you. And Sang, have you forgotten about those people in the company? They've been watching for your mistakes. If we divorce, how could they give up such a chance to attack you? Didn't you want to protect the Qin Enterprise the most? Let me stay by your side to protect Qin Enterprise together. Back then, when my parents got into a car accident, the control of the company fell into my hands while I was still a student who hadn't graduated, Maki. Many uncles on the company board dissatisfied. They want a decentralized power. They say I'm just a little girl and can't handle anything significant. The Qin family's foundation is about to collapse. Even though I try my best to hold it together, they still use my gender and age against me. I am the only daughter in the family. When all the elders fell into trouble, only my elderly grandfather provided me with a moment to catch my breath. But due to his age, he can no longer manage many things. I cannot accept the possibility of the Qin family's estate falling into any other family's hands or being divided, so I chose Huang Jiaming. He has no power or influence, and marrying him allows me to preserve my family's assets to the greatest extent possible. But this also means I've lost the support that a strategic marriage could bring. However, it's been so many years, and I'm no longer that helpless little girl unable to protect her family. Huang Jiaming is still waiting eagerly for my response, but at this moment, the door to the hospital room is forcefully pushed open. I look up and see Meng Xiaoqing standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes. Jiaming, you want to protect the Qin family for her. What about me? What about our child? Huang Jiaming's face turned pale instantly. If I am wrong and the child is wrong too, do you want to discard these mistakes, discard me and our child? With a half smile, I withdrew my hand from Huang Jiaming's grasp. Assistant Meng. I called her like this, my gaze circling between her and Huang Jiaming. Child? The child is between my husband and you. Her eyes flickered, and I continued to question her. Assistant Meng, you've been by my husband's side for years, knowing he has a family, yet you chose to have a child with him. Do you, like my husband, really want to be a mother? Enough! Huang Jiaming suddenly interrupted, breathing heavily. I shook my head and looked at him, full of disappointment. You are even more shameless and disgusting than I thought. Don't say anything more. Leave with nothing and maintain some dignity for both of us. He was in disbelief. Meng Xiaoqing spoke first. Miss Qin, I will leave with the child. Please don't make things difficult for Jia. Mr. Huang. He loves you. I won't disturb your lives anymore. Don't let me make things difficult for you. I couldn't help but interrupt. Miss Meng, don't misunderstand. He's just a cheating man full of lies. No matter how much he loves me, it's worthless. If you like him, I don't mind handing him over to you. I pretended to wipe away tears from the corner of my eyes. Besides, the child is grown now at the age of 3. They're starting to remember things. Matters between parents should settle quickly. The label of an illegitimate child isn't pleasant. Even if you don't care about yourself, think about the child. Sosai. Eddie isn't what it used to be. Do you want a child to resent you in the future? I will have a lawyer draft a divorce agreement. If there's nothing else, you all should leave. I'm really tired and want to rest. Huang Jiaming panicked. He didn't want a divorce. Qin sang, why should I leave with nothing? I may not have achieved much in the Qin Corporation over the years, but I've worked hard. Even if we are to divorce, I deserve a share of the property. Not to mention I won't agree to the divorce. I was wrong in this matter, but I will make it up to you. We've been married for 3 years and our feelings are deep, so why should we divorce over a trivial issue? What shameless arrogance. When Lin, who had left earlier, appeared again at the door of the hospital room. Sorry, the patient needs rest. Please leave. Huang Jiaming was furious. Who are you? I am her husband and have the right to see her. What gives you the right to repeatedly come here and interfere? I wearily dialed the number, and the door of the next room slammed open. Huang Jiaming's expression instantly turned more innocent when he saw the 4 people walk in. Please leave, I said. Huang Jiaming received another small beating and didn't think about coming back. However, he is not entirely a fool. After working hard for so long, how could he tolerate ending up with nothing? He hasn't been to the company for a few days. While recuperating, he spread the news about my intention to divorce him throughout the company. Outwardly, he appeared deeply affectionate, asking the uncles at the company to persuade me, to plead for my change of heart. In reality, he wanted to pressure me into compromising. Either we don't get a divorce, or I have to give him half of the assets. That's impossible. My mother-in-law is so anxious, she's getting upset. This time, she came with the intention of helping as she saw Huang Jiaming being indecisive, and Meng Xiaoqing was poised and charmingly well-behaved. Compared to being my mother-in-law, she would rather be Meng Xiaoqing's. I rarely eat at home, perhaps occasionally dinner. Most of the time, it's Aunt Wang who cooks, leaving little opportunity to drug my food. Now, staying directly at the hospital without returning home, she has even less chance with my 3 meals a day. Seeing I'm about to divorce, she wishes I would drop dead immediately, causing her son to become a widower before the divorce. The hospital security stopped her several times, but she finally seized an opportunity to rush in. Sang, Jiaming just made a foolish mistake. Men socialize outside. How can they always be perfect in every way? He made a minor error, but you can't completely deny him a chance and give him a death sentence just like that. His heart is with you. Haven't you felt that after all these years? Who in this life hasn't made some mistakes? As long as he's willing to chong. Isn't that enough? Why must it lead to divorce? I promise you, the child won't stay by your side. But after all, he's a part of our Huang family. I'll take the child back and raise him myself. It's a little hard work, but as long as you two can stay together as husband and wife, it's worth it for me. My silence bolstered my mother-in-law's confidence. Seeing my indifferent expression, she lifted the thermos flask in her hand. Mom apologizes on behalf of that kid Jiaming. Hitting or scolding him is what he deserves, but don't harm your own body by getting upset. Mom made you some soup. Give it a try. From now on, whatever you want to eat, Mom will make it for you. Food made at home is healthier than what you buy outside. The food during this time was made by Aunt Wang herself in the hospital cafeteria. It's quite amusing when you think about it. Aunt Wang asked if Wen Lin could manage it, and he directly cleared a stove for her. I glanced at the soup, and my mother-in-law awkwardly pulled her hand back. If you don't want to drink it, just don't. Haha, it's okay. I wanted both fame and fortune, to elegantly deal with the whole Huang Jiaming family, so of course, I wouldn't refuse this bowl of soup at the moment. Shortly after finishing the soup, I began to breathe rapidly and pressed the emergency bell. When the doctors and nurses rushed in, they knocked my mother-in-law aside. She was full of doubt, not knowing what had happened. There were no drugs in that bowl of soup. No matter how anxious they were, they wouldn't choose to poison me at the hospital. But it was then that I fell ill, and the hospital test results showed that I had been taking excessive amounts of psychotropic medication for a long time. I reported it to the police and provided the previous food test results. Huang Jiaming hurried to the hospital but couldn't see me. His voice was hoarse and furious on the phone. Qin sang, "Do you really have to be so ruthless?" I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the luxurious hospital room, looking down at Huang Jiaming, who was holding up his phone, his eyes fixed intently in my direction. Ignoring the strange looks from those around him, he continued to shout angrily. "My mom never poisoned you. Why are you framing her? Are you so desperate to force me to divorce that you'll do anything?" I calmly met his gaze from afar, my tone unwavering. "Aren't you the one who should know best whether there was poisoning or not? Before you came to see me, did you not go to the police station to take a good look at the evidence I submitted?" I could hear the breathing on the other end of the phone stop, and after a while, his voice sounded in my ears again. As light as a breeze. "You already know." "Since when?" I learned from his silence, then spoke calmly. "Since the moment you started. I have never been a naive, innocent young lady. On the contrary, I often felt gloomy because of my chronic health issues. When I was younger, I was so ill that I couldn't go to school like other children my age. I spent most of my time at home pondering over things. Regarding this world, I've always been more inclined to believe that malice arrives more easily than kindness. It doesn't matter whether Huang Jiaming came to me with good intentions or not. I could never truly place my trust and hope in him. I have a body that I cannot control well, so I wish even more to have control over everything else to the greatest extent possible. When my parents were still around, I only wanted to control everything apart from my body. Ever since my parents passed away, I don't trust anyone, which is why I want to control everything. I never told Huang Jiaming that I installed cameras in every room of that villa. Not only did I not tell Huang Jiaming, but in this household, I'm the only one who knows. I know he reunited with his old acquaintance Meng Xiaoqing, and I know his indecisiveness while holding his phone late at night. I know about his solemn promises to Meng Xiaoqing and his hesitations and struggles when conspiring with Huang's mother. It was I who discreetly led Meng Xiaoqing to cross paths with Huang Jiaming. I just wanted to see what choice he would make. Huang Jiaming fled in panic. He already knows that whether the marriage ends or not, he no longer has any say. But it's too late. He has already blown the matter out of proportion himself. The uncles on the board have long been eager to move. They still believe that as a woman, I can't hold on to anything. If I can't even maintain my marriage and family, how can I manage such a large company? As the saying goes, if one cannot maintain peace at home, how can they maintain peace in the world? This is the only thing they can use against me. Online rumors spread one after another. Huang Jiaming even wanted to use online public opinion to accuse me of domestic violence, not hesitating to frame and slander my family to force him to divorce. While they were discussing the suspension of my duties, a trending topic surfaced about the CEO husband of the Qin Corporation cheating, poisoning, and attempting to murder his wife. With a beaming smile, I appeared in the company meeting room and announced my decision to get a divorce. I am the perfect victim and also a decisive executor. Huang Jiaming's mother was imprisoned. She took responsibility for all the poisoning charges. However, the poisoning did not cause any substantial personal injury to me, nor significant property damage, so the sentence shouldn't have been that severe. Unfortunately, she is suspected of child trafficking. Back then, Huang Jiasin gave birth to a girl. She took the girl away and sold her for 20,000 yuan. Huang Jiasin clung to Huang mother's sleeve, sobbing uncontrollably. Regina. I thought that you truly cared about me a little, that you were worried I'd be left all alone in the future with no one to rely on. I didn't expect that this was your plan all along. You wanted to pave the way for your precious son and grandson. Why, Mom, why? I've already compromised. I've given up all my opportunities in this life to Jia Ming. Why does even my child have to give up their position? Huang Jiaming left with nothing after the divorce. Because of Huang mother's involvement, he didn't face legal consequences. But once the news broke, the stain of wife murderer would follow him like a shadow on his record for the rest of his life. Admittedly, part of this was the result of my deliberate maneuvering. After all, the Qin family in City A is considered a fairly respectable family. I still hold a grudge against him. Rather than seeing him in jail, I'd rather watch him fall from grace, never able to lift his head again. Standing before me was Meng Xiaoqing, her face full of hatred. You told me you were going to divorce Huang Jiaming and hand him over to me. Was it just so you could destroy him and then throw him to me like trash? I corrected her statement. It wasn't me who destroyed him. It was you. It was himself who destroyed himself. She retorted hatefully. But all of this is your doing. Obviously, everything was fine before. I was puzzled. The reason everything seemed fine before was because I was the only one suffering in silence. I was kept in the dark, secretly drugged, my family's wealth coveted. Miss Meng, I'm not the culprit of your current predicament. In fact, I haven't even exposed your status as the mistress. If you've come to me today expecting an apology, then I'm sorry to disappoint you. She stopped me from getting up and glanced behind me. I turned to see a drastically changed Jia Ming Huang. He had lost a lot of weight, looking clearly beaten down, despondent and dejected. Sang, why aren't you sad at all? How can you be so heartless towards me? I was just momentarily confused and made a mistake. Why won't you forgive me just once? Do you really want to push me to my death? Did you ever love me or care about me? You see, he's still the same as always. His cheating and poison attempt were just momentary lapses, merely small mistakes. Yet when I protect myself and stay away from danger, it's considered heartless, as if I don't love. Back then, many people took the chance to curry favor with me, but you were the one I personally chose to be my husband, so of course I cared about you. It's just a pity that people's hearts change, and true intentions change in an instant. I gave you a chance. If you had agreed to the divorce back then, things wouldn't have escalated to this point. It was your greed that ruined you. He was on the verge of collapse, and I glanced at Meng Xiaoqing, who was particularly unwilling to accept it. Everyone must pay the price for their choices. Falling in love is easy, but staying together is hard. Don't let down the person in front of you. I had only taken a couple of steps when Huang Jiaming's unwilling roar came from behind. You're lying. You never intended to let me go. All you wanted was an ex-husband that everyone despises. You cold-hearted, cold-blooded liar. You never intended to let me go. I didn't stop, and didn't look back. In the end, Huang Jiasin still asked me to help her find her child. Her eyes were swollen, like peaches. I'm sorry, Sang. I know I have no right to come to you. After what they did to you, I still shamelessly ask for your help. I held her hand. You have done nothing wrong to me. The police have already apprehended that group of child traffickers. If they can provide information about the whereabouts of the children in the follow-up investigation, I will have someone notify you immediately. The reason this case was resolved so smoothly was that I provided the police with very detailed evidence. Huang Jiaming discussed with Huang's mother right under my nose about how to bring the child over to raise them. When Huang's mother saw that Huang Jiasin had given birth to another girl, she simply decided to act recklessly and swapped the child. She thought that if Huang Jiasin was getting remarried and insisted on having that child, it would be better to have a boy. That way, that family could see that Huang Jiasin can have sons. I had someone secretly take photos of their transaction. Tracing the clues to investigate the child's matter has become extremely difficult. The news from the private detective was becoming less frequent. We could only roughly estimate the child's whereabouts. Fortunately, time didn't drag on too long, and with police involvement, the chances of finding the child became much greater than before. The next time I heard news about Huang Jiaming was when Cheng Lin kept inviting me to dinner. Because of me, reputable companies in the industry were unwilling to hire him. Actually, it also had something to do with his personal abilities. When he was with the Qin family, after all, he was the president's husband. His actual abilities were not very outstanding. Unable to join a decent company, he could only go to private enterprises. As for Meng Xiaoqing, although I did not publicly reveal her identity as the third party, online discussions were rampant. To address public opinion, the dismissal notice was issued through the company's official account. Even though we censored the names of Huang Jiaming and her, those familiar within the circle knew who it was. This identity was extremely sensitive, and her career in this field was over. She lost her job, but she still had a child to raise. Years of high-quality living had made Huang Jiaming quite pampered, and he couldn't accept everything he was now facing. Being a laborer compared to the once glorious President Huang truly lacked dignity. Before long, he stopped working, indulging in alcohol and the online world. Meng Xiaoqing asked him for money, as both the child's education and her living expenses needed financial support. People who are demoralized yet eager for quick success have little resistance to gambling. This is how Huang Jiaming started gambling, incurring gambling debts, and living a wretched life. When he was cornered with debt collectors at his door, he begged Meng Xiaoqing to help him pay off his debts. Meng Xiaoqing, having reached her limit, kicked him out and swiftly moved house, disregarding even the child. I felt quite regretful. Initially, I thought that Meng Xiaoqing and Huang Jiaming shared youthful fondness, being each other's sweet first love from high school. Love at that time was relatively pure, cleaner, and devoid of any entanglements of interest. Two people separated during a youth filled with regrets, and when they reunited, the person from their memories was right in front of them. The old friendship rekindled, burning far beyond Huang Jiaming's reason. They spent time together and fell in love during those fleeting moments. Unexpectedly, once they lost the light each other provided and returned to the same place, they still couldn't come together. When Cheng Lin looked up from the plate in front of him and raised an eyebrow. You really didn't expect them to end up like this? I suppressed the slyness in my eyes. How could that be? I sincerely hope they both have better lives. He clicked his tongue twice, incredulous. You're still the same as before, mischievous in a sly way. Lately, he's been finding various excuses to meet me, acting as if he's very familiar with who I used to be, which has made me quite curious. Were you really that familiar with me back then? Why have I barely remembered you all these years? He picked up a piece of meat and stuffed it into his mouth, speaking indistinctly. Back then, who were you close to? I didn't see you being familiar with anyone. You seemed very distant. I wanted to make an impression on you, but there wasn't any chance. Later, I heard something happened to your family, and I wasn't capable at the time. I could only contact my family to help your parents as much as they could. No wonder it was so easy to get in touch with that prestigious private hospital back then. It turned out he secretly asked someone to help. Fortunately, now I have the chance. His eyes were bright, making my heart race for a moment. I'm not a fool. I understand his feelings. But I'm also very scared that he'll see the real me and discover my darkness and scheming. The phone on the table vibrated. There was a call coming in. Feeling like I'd been granted a pardon,